I never thought I'd have to arrest someone over a farm fence dispute, but life in rural Maple Creek is full of surprises. My name is Thomas Wilson, and I've been sheriff of Ridgway County for 15 years. I live on my family's century-old farm where I raise horses and grow corn when I'm not enforcing the law. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. 3 months ago, Carol Peterson and her husband moved into the vacant property next to mine. They came from some fancy neighborhood in the city, bringing along their expectations of manicured lawns, homeowners associations, and strict property codes. None of which exist out here in farm country. What makes this whole situation funny is that Mrs. Peterson, now nicknamed Karen by everyone in town, has no idea I'm the sheriff. When we first met, I was in my work clothes, introduced myself simply as Tom Wilson, and she never bothered to learn more about her neighbors. My mailbox just says Wilson, and I don't park my patrol car at home. To her, I'm just the annoying farmer next door with an eyesore of a fence. The trouble started about 2 weeks after the Petersons moved in. I was fixing a section of my split-rail fence that marks the boundary between our properties. This fence has stood for over 50 years, rebuilt by my father and now maintained by me. It's sturdy, functional, and fits perfectly with the rural character of our community. I was hammering in a loose post when Mrs. Peterson marched over, designer sunglasses perched on her nose despite the cloudy day. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "What exactly are you doing?" I wiped sweat from my forehead and smiled. "Just fixing this old fence. Some posts got loose during the last storm." She looked at the fence like it was covered in garbage. "Well, it's absolutely hideous. Our last neighborhood had strict rules about fencing. Wooden privacy fences or nothing at all." "Welcome to farm country," I said, trying to stay friendly. "Out here, fences are about keeping animals in, not about looks." She crossed her arms. "We paid good money for this property, and I won't have its value destroyed by your rustic eyesore. I expect you'll be replacing it with something more appropriate." Before I could explain that the fence was perfectly legal and appropriate for the area, she turned and walked away, phone already in hand. That was my first warning that Mrs. Peterson would be trouble. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Peterson's complaints escalated. First came a handwritten note stuck to my mailbox demanding I remove the fence immediately. Then came the calls to the county office asking about zoning regulations. My secretary Linda would call me laughing after each one. She asked for the property code enforcement officer again, Linda would say. I told her all complaints go through the sheriff's office, and she said she doesn't trust the local sheriff to enforce codes properly. If only she knew. I tried to be a good neighbor. I went over one evening with a fresh apple pie from the local bakery. Mr. Peterson seemed nice enough, a quiet man who looked tired all the time. He apologized for Carol's passion for property values, but couldn't seem to say much when she was around. Mrs. Peterson refused the pie, saying she was gluten-sensitive, and immediately started in about the fence again. "I've researched the county regulations," she said, waving a printed stack of papers. Section 5.3 clearly states that all fencing must conform to neighborhood standards. I tried not to smile. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm very familiar with county regulations. That section applies to planned communities with homeowners associations, not to agricultural properties." "We'll see about that," she snapped, slamming her door in my face. The next day she called the county office again, this time demanding to speak to the sheriff personally about her criminal neighbor. Linda patched the call through to me while I was in my office. "Sheriff Wilson speaking," I answered professionally. "Yes, hello," she said, not recognizing my voice. "I need to file a formal complaint against my neighbor, Thomas Wilson. He's refusing to remove an illegal fence that's destroying property values in our neighborhood." I took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I'm familiar with the property in question. That fence is completely legal under county code for agricultural land." "Absolutely not. I've read the regulations. You people out here just don't care about standards." Her voice got higher with each word. "Mrs. Peterson, I assure you I know the regulations very well. There's nothing illegal about that fence." "Well, if you won't help me, I'll call someone who will." She hung up. I shook my head and called Officer Jenkins. "Keep an eye on the Peterson place. I think our new neighbor might be escalating things." A week passed quietly. I hoped Mrs. Peterson had finally accepted the reality of country living. I was wrong. Saturday morning, I was enjoying my coffee on the front porch, watching the sun rise over my cornfields. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of splintering wood. I ran to the property line to find Mrs. Peterson and her husband attacking my fence with a sledgehammer and crowbar. They had already destroyed about 20 feet of it. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, running toward them. Mrs. Peterson stood tall, hands on her hips. "Taking matters into my own hands. Since nobody in this backward town will enforce proper standards, I'm removing this monstrosity myself." Her husband looked miserable but kept prying at a post with his crowbar. "Stop right now," I said firmly. "You're destroying my property." "It's on the property line, which makes it partly mine," she declared. "That's not how property law works, and you know it. Put the tools down now." She laughed dismissively. "Or what? You'll call the sheriff? Go ahead. I've already tried that route and he's useless." That's when I decided it was time for Mrs. Peterson to learn exactly who her neighbor was. "I don't need to call the sheriff," I said calmly. "I am the sheriff." Her face froze in confusion. "What?" "Sheriff Thomas Wilson at your service." I pulled my badge from my pocket where I'd grabbed it before running out. "And you're currently committing criminal property damage. Put the tools down now." Mr. Peterson immediately dropped the crowbar like it was on fire. "Carol, he's the sheriff. I told you we should have just built our own fence." Mrs. Peterson's face turned red, then white, then red again. You can't be. You're just a farmer." "I'm both. Welcome to small-town life. Now you have two choices. Put the tools down and we can discuss this civilly, or I can place you under arrest." Instead of complying, she raised the sledgehammer again. "This is some kind of joke. You can't be the sheriff." I pulled out my phone. "Officer Jenkins, I need backup at my property. The Petersons are destroying my fence." Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up. Officer Jenkins and Deputy Rodriguez approached, both looking like they were trying not to laugh. "Problem, Sheriff?" Jenkins asked. "Criminal damage to property," I said formally. "Mrs. Peterson, you're under arrest." The look on Mrs. Peterson's face when Officer Jenkins handcuffed her was something I'll never forget. Pure shock mixed with embarrassment and anger. Her husband wasn't arrested since he immediately cooperated and apologized profusely. "This is outrageous," she kept yelling as they put her in the patrol car. "Do you know who my brother is?" "He's a lawyer in the city." "Then he can meet you at the station," I replied calmly. At the station, I let Mrs. Peterson call her brother while she waited in a holding cell. He arrived 3 hours later, looking annoyed but professional in his expensive suit. "Sheriff Wilson?" he asked, extending his hand. "Mark Johnson. I understand my sister has caused some trouble." I shook his hand. "That's putting it mildly, Mr. Johnson. Criminal property damage, for starters." He sighed deeply. "May I speak with her?" After they talked, Mr. Johnson approached me with a surprisingly reasonable attitude. "Sheriff, my sister has always been particular about property aesthetics. Moving to the country was her husband's idea, not hers. That said, her behavior is inexcusable." "I agree," I said. "What would it take to resolve the situation amicably?" "I'm prepared to pay for damages." I thought for a moment. "The fence repairs will cost about $1,200. But there's a bigger issue here. Your sister needs to understand that she can't force city rules on rural communities." He nodded. "I understand. What do you propose?" "Community service," I said. "Specifically, I want her to help with the County Historical Society's fence restoration project. They're rebuilding the historic rail fences around the old courthouse. 6 weekends of work. She'll learn about why these fences matter to our community." Mr. Johnson looked surprised. "That's actually very reasonable. I'm not interested in ruining anyone's life, Mr. Johnson. I just want your sister to respect our community and its ways." We drew up the agreement, and Mrs. Peterson reluctantly signed it, avoiding eye contact with me the entire time. The following Saturday was Mrs. Peterson's first day of community service. She showed up at the courthouse wearing designer clothes completely unsuitable for physical work. Ms. Haggerty, the 70-year-old head of the Historical Society, took one look at her and handed her overalls and work gloves. "Put these on, dear. You'll ruin those pretty clothes otherwise." For 6 weekends, Mrs. Peterson learned how to split rails, notch posts, and build a proper farm fence. At first, she complained constantly, but Ms. Haggerty was having none of it. "Young lady," she said during a particularly vocal complaint session, "these fences have stood in our county for over 150 years. They survived the Civil War, the Great Depression, and every storm God sent our way. They'll certainly survive your bad attitude." Surprisingly, by the 4th weekend, something changed. I stopped by to check on the project and found Mrs. Peterson carefully measuring a rail, her face showing concentration rather than disdain. "Sheriff Wilson," she acknowledged me without the usual venom. Mrs. Peterson. The fence is looking good. She straightened up, pushing hair from her face. Ms. Haggerty has been teaching me about why these fences are built this way. Did you know they don't use nails? The whole structure locks together naturally. It's actually ingenious. My grandfather taught me how to build them, I said. Said a good rail fence will outlast the builder if it's done right. She nodded slowly. I've been thinking, maybe I reacted too strongly about your fence. It's just different from what I'm used to. Change can be hard, I agreed. But sometimes what looks like an eyesore at first glance has value you can't see right away. By the final weekend, Mrs. Peterson had become somewhat of an expert on split-rail fences. I overheard her explaining to a tourist why the design was perfect for the local environment and historically significant to the area's agricultural heritage. After completing her community service, Mrs. Peterson surprised everyone by joining the Historical Society as a volunteer. She even helped organize a fundraiser to restore more of the county's historic fences. One evening, about 2 months after the incident, there was a knock at my door. Mrs. Peterson stood there holding a cake container. Sheriff Wilson. Tom. I baked this. It's gluten-free, she added with a small smile. I wanted to apologize properly for my behavior. Moving here was an adjustment. I was trying to make everything like my old neighborhood instead of appreciating what makes this place special. I accepted the cake with surprise. Apology accepted, Mrs. Peterson. Please call me Carol. And I was wondering, would you be willing to help me design a split-rail fence for my garden? Nothing fancy, just something that fits with the property. I couldn't help but smile. I'd be happy to help. Over the next few weekends, we built a small decorative rail fence around Carol's vegetable garden, something she'd started after learning about local farming traditions from other historical society members. Mr. Peterson seemed delighted with the change in his wife, telling me quietly, "Thank you for what you did." She needed to connect with this place instead of fighting it. The following spring, the Petersons hosted a community barbecue in their backyard. Carol proudly showed off her garden and the split-rail fence surrounding it. She'd even added some traditional touches she'd learned about from Ms. Haggerty. As I watched her explain to city relatives why rail fences were superior to modern alternatives, I caught her eye and we shared a knowing smile. Sometimes, the best way to resolve a conflict isn't through force or punishment, but by helping someone understand and appreciate a different perspective. The fence that once divided us had somehow brought our community closer together. And that, I think, is the best kind of justice. These days, when new people move to our area from the city, Carol is the first to welcome them. She created a new neighbor guide to country living pamphlet that explains local customs, the historical significance of traditional farm structures, and yes, a whole section dedicated to understanding different types of rural fencing. The pamphlet ends with a line that always makes me smile. Remember, what might look like an eyesore at first glance could be a piece of living history. Before you complain, take time to learn why things are the way they are. You might just find beauty in the unexpected. The split-rail fence between our properties still stands, weathered and sturdy. But it's no longer a barrier. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to resolve differences is by building bridges of understanding instead of walls of judgment. And whenever I see Carol leading tours for the Historical Society's annual Heritage Fence Festival, yes, that's a real thing now, I can't help but think that sometimes the most satisfying justice isn't about punishment, but transformation.